Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission right now is to unpack this truly haunting transcript
Hmm.
sourced from a YouTube channel called The Midnight Curator.
Right, yeah.
And the narrative we're dissecting today, it's titled, I Visited a Village Where Travelers Never Leave.
Such a cheerful title, right?
I know, right?
Yeah.
But I need to be clear right up front with you guys listening. We aren't just here to, recap a spooky campfire tale.
No, definitely not.
We are going to tear this narrative apart and really look at the gears turning underneath.
Yeah.
Because this is a meticulously constructed account of this metaphysical trap.
A very elaborate trap.
Yeah, hidden deep in the mountains of Eastern Europe. And what we're going to explore today is how this mysterious, totally undocumented village preys specifically on modern travel culture.
Yeah, that's the key part. It's the modern aspect of it.
Exactly. It exploits the psychology of the modern explorer. It lures them in, strips away their defenses, and subjects them to this horrifying, cyclical process of disappearance and imitation.
It really is a fascinating and just deeply unsettling piece of source material.
It really is.
Because it forces us to kind of re-examine the mechanics of exploration itself, you know? Like, we are looking at a destination that acts as a predator.
A literal predator.
Right. And
Yeah.
we're going to break down exactly how it engineers the downfall of its victims step by step.
So as we get into this, I want you, listening to the deep dive right now, to think about your own travel habits.
Yeah, we all have them.
Think about that desire you might have to find the hidden gems. You know,
Oh, absolutely.
those places completely off the beaten path that aren't, clogged with tourists. Think about the thrill of discovery. Because today, we are going to explore exactly what happens when the place you are trying to consume decides that it's hungry too.
Wow. That word, consume, that is the perfect place to start.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. Because the relationship between a traveler and a destination, it's usually framed as a one-way transaction.
Right. Usually there is this expectation of consumption. It's like a buffet.
Exactly like a buffet.
You go to a new city, you take your photos, you buy the little souvenirs, you eat the local food, and then you just pack all those experiences into your suitcase and bring them back home to add to your life.
Yeah, and in that traditional dynamic, the traveler is the active participant, right?
Yeah.
They're the agent of change, and the place they're visiting is relegated to being just a passive backdrop.
Just a stage.
Exactly. A stage set for the traveler's personal growth or entertainment or Instagram feed.
Safe, clean, and completely under the traveler's control.
Yeah.
But then you step into the world of this transcript, and that entire dynamic is violently inverted.
It is flipped completely upside down. So let's start by looking at the prey.
Okay, let's do it.
Because a trap as sophisticated as the one in this village, it doesn't just capture anyone who wanders by.
Right, it's not random.
Not at all. It requires a specific type of victim. It demands a particular psychological profile to work properly.
Okay, so let's look at our protagonist, the narrator of the transcript. We're dealing with a 26-year-old who has already visited 14 countries.
14 by 26 is a lot.
It's a ton. And we need to establish right away that we aren't talking about standard resort vacations here.
No all-inclusive wristbands here.
No, this isn't someone going to a gated community in Cabo.
Far from it. I mean, the itinerary they boast about includes trekking through isolated mountains in Nepal,
Yeah.
staying in these quiet, completely undocumented villages in Japan, navigating the deep deserts of Morocco,
Wow.
and finding small coastal towns in Portugal where absolutely nobody spoke English.
So this is a person who fiercely prides themselves on being a quote-unquote real traveler.
Right. Explicitly not a tourist. They would hate that word.
They would.
Yeah.
And there is a quote right at the beginning of the source material that I think serves as the psychological anchor for everything that happens to them.
The collection quote.
Yes. They say, some people collect photos, some collect souvenirs, but I collect places.
I really want to pause on that word, collect.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
Because it is incredibly revealing. When you look at what it actually means to collect a place, it exposes this deep-seated arrogance that the village ultimately weaponizes against them.
How so? Because on the surface, I mean, that just sounds like someone who values experiences over material things,
Yeah.
right? Which society generally applauds.
It does, yeah. But look at the mechanics of a collection.
Okay.
When you collect something, you own it. You diminish it to an object whose sole purpose is to sit on a metaphorical shelf and add value to your identity.
Oh, wow. That's a dark way to look at it, but it makes sense.
Think about it. A butterfly collector pins the butterfly to a board. It's beautiful, sure, but it's dead. and it belongs to the collector.
Right.
This traveler defines their entire sense of self by their ability to conquer obscure locations. They aren't necessarily traveling to connect with other cultures in a meaningful, reciprocal way.
They just want the badge.
Exactly. They're traveling to acquire these places as trophies.
That is a brilliant distinction. It's an ego trip disguised as rugged exploration. It reminds me of a very specific kind of music fan, like a vinyl collector who only wants the rarest, unreleased test pressings.
Oh, yeah. The snobs.
You're right. And they look down on anyone who listens to anything remotely mainstream. At a certain point, the music itself almost doesn't matter anymore.
It's just about having the thing no one else has.
Exactly. It's the
Exactly.
exclusivity they're addicted to. They're chasing what we could call travel clout.
Travel clout, yes. And that relentless pursuit of clout is exactly what creates a massive blind spot for our protagonists.
Yeah, there's a crucial interaction early in the narrative between the protagonist and their mother right before this trip to Eastern Europe.
The warning.
Yes, the mother represents the voice of the normal world here. She asks this very simple, grounded question. She says, "Why do you always travel to places no one goes?"
And the protagonist's reaction is so telling.
They just laugh it off.
They totally dismiss it.
Yeah, they dismissively reply, because that's what the real stories are. It's a complete rejection of a genuine, instinctual warning.
And to understand how the trap works, we really have to understand why that warning was ignored.
Right.
I mean, the mother's question is rooted in basic human survival instinct. Historically, if humans avoided a specific place, there's usually a geographic or predatory reason for it, right?
Like, don't go to the poisoned water hole.
Exactly. But the protagonist's hubris just overrides that instinct. They actively seek out places with zero documentation.
Which is wild in this day and age.
It is. They mention finding this village on a few obscure, buried travel blogs that simply called it beautiful but strange.
That's it. That's the only review.
That's it. There are no tourist guides, barely any photos, zero TripAdvisor reviews.
Which, to a rational person, a complete lack of information in the 21st century is a massive red flag.
Huge red flag. But to this specific type of collector, a lack of information isn't a red flag at all.
No,
It's blood in the water. It's the ultimate prize.
because it proves that the location hasn't been ruined yet by other people. I want to throw a question to you, the listener, as we dive deeper into this. Think about the times you've searched for the most quote-unquote authentic experience possible.
It's a common drive.
At what point does the desperate search for authenticity actually blind you to physical danger?
That's the real question.
Because this obsession with the undocumented is the exact vulnerability the village is looking for.
The bait is out there.
And the psychological bait has been taken. And once the journey begins, we see how the physical world starts working to systematically strip away the traveler's defenses.
Yeah, the descent into the trap is just a masterclass in psychological and geographical isolation.
It really is.
The village doesn't exist just off a main highway. You can't just take an Uber there. The logistics required to get there serve as a deliberate filtering mechanism.
Right, let's track the itinerary. It's exhausting just to read about. It requires 2 international flights, a regional train ride, and finally a 6-hour ride on a rattling, ancient bus deep into the mountains of Eastern Europe.
And that grueling sequence isn't just about distance.
What's it about?
It's about exhaustion. By the time the protagonist is actually on that bus, their critical thinking skills are already severely degraded by travel fatigue.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
And it's on this specific bus ride that the narrative really shifts from an adventurous travel vlog into something deeply claustrophobic.
Yeah, the atmosphere shift is incredibly heavy here. The environment itself starts closing in.
Literally closing in.
The transcript describes the sky turning bruised and dark, and this thick, unnatural fog starts rolling across the mountain road in literal waves.
Waves of fog.
The physical world outside the windows is literally obscuring itself.
I'm really glad you brought up the fog, actually, because it serves a dual purpose.
Oh, like what?
Well, it's not just spooky set dressing, you know. Functionally, it acts as a physical and psychological barrier.
Right.
It's actively severing the protagonist's visual connection to the normal, rational world. They are being forced into a state of sensory deprivation.
Which makes them more vulnerable.
Exactly. This is a classic mythological trope, honestly. Crossing the boundary, the threshold between the realm of the living and the realm of the other.
Wow. And the isolation outside is perfectly mirrored by the bizarre social environment inside the bus.
It's so creepy inside that bus.
Out of dozens of empty seats, there are only 4 passengers
4 people.
and the driver. The driver hasn't spoken a single word since the protagonist handed over their ticket.
Not a word.
Not a greeting, not a grunt, just absolute stone-cold silence.
Which creates a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
And in that vacuum, about 2 hours into this foggy, silent ride, the protagonist has an interaction that objectively should have ended the trip right there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the old man.
Yes, the old man on the bus.
Sitting across the aisle is this passenger in his 70s, deep wrinkles, incredibly tired eyes. He leans over and asks the protagonist where they are heading.
Just making small talk.
Exactly.
Ha.
But the moment the protagonist names the village they read about on those obscure blogs, the old man's reaction is visceral.
He loses it.
He turns completely pale. He physically recoils, shakes his head, and whispers, "You shouldn't go there."
And the protagonist, still operating under that polite, modern traveler social contract, they gently ask why.
Like, oh, is there bad weather?
Right. And the old man looks up at the rearview mirror at the silent driver, looks out the window at the impenetrable fog, and delivers this chilling piece of exposition.
Yeah, goosebumps reading this part.
He says, "You're not the first traveler who went there, and none of them ever came back."
None of them ever came back.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to stop right here because I am really struggling with our protagonist's survival instincts right now.
I know, it's frustrating.
If you are on a strange bus in a foreign country and a terrified local whose face has literally drained of color tells you that people disappear forever in the place you are going,
You leave.
why on earth do you stay in your seat? I mean, why don't you demand the driver turn around or just get off at the very next populated town?
Well, it goes back to the psychological profile we spent time establishing in the beginning.
Yeah.
The protagonist hears the warning, sure, but their brain immediately translates it into a different language.
What do you mean by that?
They rationalize it to protect their ego. The transcript notes that the protagonist assumes it's just a joke, like a local legend meant to scare gullible tourists.
Right, like a ghost story for the out-of-towner.
Exactly. To accept the old man's warning as literal truth would mean admitting several devastating things to themselves.
Like what?
Well, it would mean admitting their mother was right to worry.
Ouch. Yeah.
It would mean admitting their pursuit of the obscure is actually foolish and dangerous, not brave. And it would completely shatter their core identity as a fearless, worldly explorer.
Ah, I see. It's almost like summit fever for mountain climbers.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
When climbers get near the top of Mount Everest, they've invested so much money, years of training, and their entire ego into reaching the peak. So even when a massive storm rolls in and turning back is the only logical way to survive, they just keep climbing into the death zone because a turnaround feels like a total destruction of their identity.
That is a perfect analogy. The protagonist is experiencing geographical summit fever.
Yes.
They've taken 2 flights and a train. They have invested way too much of their self-worth into collecting this village to let a spooky story deter them now.
But the red flags just keep getting bigger.
They really do.
Because eventually the bus grinds to a halt in the middle of absolute nowhere.
Nowhere.
It's surrounded by pitch black fog. There are no streetlights, no buildings, and the silent driver finally speaks.
Finally.
He opens doors and says, "This is the last stop."
Now, pay close attention to the driver's phrasing there.
Okay.
He doesn't say, "This is your destination."
Right.
He doesn't say, "Here is the village." He says, "This is the last stop."
Oh, wow.
That is a definitive severing of ties. The vehicle of the normal world can go no further.
It's cutting them off. And as the protagonist steps off into the freezing mountain air, they hear the old man on the bus nervously whispering under his breath, almost like a prayer.
Just praying for them.
The doors slam shut, and the bus just drives away, totally abandoning them in the mist.
The traveler is now completely untethered.
Think about the raw anxiety of that moment. I want the listener to really put themselves in these shoes for a second.
It's a terrifying scenario.
Think about the last time you were driving somewhere completely unfamiliar, maybe the sun is going down, and you look at your phone and see no service.
The worst feeling.
Remember that very specific sharp spike of anxiety in your chest?
Yeah.
Now multiply that by 1,000. You are standing on a dirt road in Eastern Europe, surrounded by fog so thick you can't see the trees. Your phone is completely dead, just showing an empty blue dot miles from anywhere.
Yeah, the trap has successfully isolated its prey.
It has.
The warnings have been rationalized away, the point of no return has been officially crossed, and the traveler is now entirely cut off from the rational world. It's so bleak.
Which brings us to the actual architecture of the village itself. Because the way this place is constructed is just brilliant in its malice.
Yes, the village doesn't just look spooky, you know? It is highly functional.
Exactly. It operates entirely as bait. It is designed to simulate a destination, but it's a total facade.
Let's walk down that foggy dirt road with the protagonist.
Let's do it.
After the bus leaves, they walk for about 10 minutes in absolute dead silence. And I mean dead silence.
No ambient noise at all.
No wind in the branches, no insects, no birds, just the crunch of their own boots.
So eerie.
Finally, they stumble upon a wooden sign leaning against a tree. It has the faded name of the village painted on it, but underneath the paint, carved deep into the wood with what looks like frantic scratches, are 3 words.
The scratches are such a great detail.
Last trip here.
And once again, watch how the protagonist handles this data point.
It's so frustrating.
The conscious mind tries to reject the horror. They tell themselves not to overthink it, just dismissing it as edgy graffiti left by some other backpacker.
Right.
Right.
The psychological conditioning of the modern traveler, that need to push through discomfort for the reward of discovery, it's so deeply ingrained that it just overrides basic threat detection.
They push forward. The trees start closing in. The branches are twisting and blocking out whatever moonlight is left, until finally
I see it.
they see it. Dim yellow lights glowing through the fog.
The moment of arrival.
And relief washes over them. They think, okay, I made it. It's a real place. There are lights, there are people.
But that relief is short-lived.
It evaporates almost instantly, because as they walk into the village, they realize something is fundamentally, horrifyingly wrong with the picture in front of them.
Let's break down the visual. What does the protagonist actually see?
It's composed of these small, ancient-looking wooden houses. The paint is peeling, the roofs are sagging under the weight of wet moss. Looks like it hasn't been repaired in a century.
Very dilapidated.
But every single house has its lights blazing.
Every single one. Every light and every window is on. Yet the village is entombed in silence?
Right. Which makes no sense.
Think about it. If every house in a community is awake and active, you should hear the ambient noise of human life.
Yeah, you'd hear something.
Muffled conversations, a television, music, the clatter of dishes, a dog barking.
But there is nothing. The protagonist stands in the street and calls out, "Hello?" And their voice just gets swallowed by the fog. No one answers. No doors open.
This is a textbook, terrifying example of the uncanny valley effect applied to architecture.
Oh, unpack that for us. Usually we hear uncanny valley applied to AI or robots that look almost human, but not quite, and it triggers a revulsion response in our brains. How does that apply to a town?
It's a great question. The uncanny valley happens when something simulates life well enough to be recognizable, but fails on the micro details, revealing it to be artificial.
Okay.
The village is simulating a living community to lure the traveler in. It understands the basic visual grammar of human settlements.
Like houses need lights.
Right, so it turns them all on. But it doesn't understand the nuance. It fails to replicate the actual chaos, messiness, and noise of human existence.
That makes so much sense. And it gets even creepier when you look at the windows. Every single house has its curtains drawn tightly shut. It's as if whatever is generating that light inside those houses isn't meant to be seen by the bait walking outside.
Yeah, it creates a powerful sense of being watched from behind the veil. The simulation only goes skin deep.
Which is perfectly illustrated by the grocery store the protagonist finds.
Ah, the grocery store, such a great scene.
They walk up to this little shop on the corner. The lights are glaring inside. But when they look through the dusty glass, the store is completely abandoned.
Completely empty.
There's no cashier, there are no fresh goods, just empty, dusty shelves with a few faded, ancient food packages sitting there. But the electricity is running perfectly.
See, the village is presenting the illusion of commerce and sustenance, the exact things a weary traveler would naturally seek out. But there is no actual substance behind the illusion. The power is running to an empty room solely to create a glowing beacon in the fog.
I love this detail because it reminds me of walking onto a Hollywood movie set after all the crews have gone home.
Oh yeah, like a backlot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
From the street, the facades look like real houses, the street lamps are illuminating the road, but if you walk up and open a front door, there's no living room.
Right.
There's just wooden scaffolding and sandbags holding up the fake wall. It's stage play.
Yeah.
But this raises a really important question about the nature of this trap.
What's your theory?
Is the village actively putting on a show specifically for this protagonist?
Like it knew they were coming?
Yeah. Did it sense them coming and turn the lights on? Or is the traveler just trespassing on an automated supernatural process, like a broken machine that was left running centuries ago?
That is a profound distinction to make. Is it a sentient predator or an automated hazard? The evidence in the source material strongly points toward an automated ritualistic process, like a machine of sorts.
Interesting.
The village isn't putting on a bespoke show just for them. It is simply executing its programming. And we see the physical manifestation of this automated pull in the dirt road itself.
Oh, the footprints.
Yes, the footprints.
Protagonist looks down at the muddy road and notices fresh footprints.
Mm.
But they aren't the chaotic, crisscrossing tracks of normal pedestrians going about their day.
No, not at all.
The transcript describes dozens, maybe hundreds of footprints, and they are all perfectly synchronized.
Like an army.
They're all pointed in the exact same direction, moving in a massive, uniform herd straight toward the center of the village.
See, it completely strips away all human individuality.
Right.
Think about a normal town square. People wander, they stop to look at a bird, they cross the street to talk to a neighbor. These footprints show no wandering, no hesitation, no exploration.
It's just a march.
It is a hive mind march.
And here is the tragic irony of our protagonist. Because they define themselves as a traveler, because their entire identity is based on following the path to see what's at the very end.
They don't run away.
No, they don't run away. They follow those synchronized footprints. They let their curiosity drag them right into the heart of the village.
They follow the breadcrumbs straight into the center of the web.
Yep.
And that is where the illusion of the quiet, spooky town shatters entirely, and the true, horrifying purpose of the machinery is revealed.
So the protagonist walks into the center square, where the fog thins out just a little bit, and they find the source of the footprints.
The gathering.
There are about 20 villagers gathered in the square. Men, women, some elderly people in heavy coats. But they aren't interacting.
No,
They aren't talking or looking at each other. They are standing perfectly still, like statues, all facing the dead center of the square.
They are completely entranced.
Yeah.
And what are they staring at?
A large, ancient stone well. The stone is cracked, the mortar is crumbling, and the entire structure is covered in a thick layer of pale, fluttering moths.
Such a vivid, creepy image.
It is such a visceral, ancient image. The protagonist is terrified, naturally, but they walk up to one of the men and tap him on the shoulder.
A desperate attempt to find a grounding human connection.
Exactly, like, hey, are you okay? But the man's skin is ice cold. His eyes are wide open but completely empty, like he hasn't slept in weeks.
And he doesn't react.
He doesn't react to the tap at all. He doesn't even blink. He just keeps staring at the well.
Because the villagers are not a community.
No.
They are an audience, or perhaps more accurately, attendants to the machine. Because then the silence of the square is finally broken by the machinery waking up.
Oh man, this part. A deep, low, rumbling noise echoes from far below the ground, vibrating up through the stones of the well.
And the reaction is instantaneous.
The moment that sound hits the air, all 20 villagers lean forward, perfectly synchronized, like a single organism reacting to a stimulus.
The well is the processing center of the trap.
And the sounds coming out of it are pure nightmare fuel.
Sure.
After the rumble, the protagonist hears a deep scraping noise. Stone grinding against stone, like something incredibly heavy is dragging itself up the inside walls.
Dragging itself up.
And underneath that, scraping,
Breathing.
slow, heavy breathing.
The transcript actually notes that the breathing sounded too human, but also not human at all.
It's the sound of something mimicking lungs.
Yes.
And then, a pale, dirt-covered hand reaches out of the darkness and grabs the edge of the stone.
It pulls itself up.
A man pulls himself out of the well. His clothes are torn, his fingernails are bleeding, and he collapses onto the cobblestones, panting in absolute terror.
Now, this is where the narrative shifts from just atmospheric dread to actually explaining its own supernatural physics.
Great.
The interaction that happens next between this escaping man and the villagers, it reveals the metaphysical rules of the trap.
Right. So the man on the ground looks up, sees the protagonist, and gasps, "You're not from here, you need to leave right now."
It's the second warning the traveler gets, echoing the old man on the bus.
But before the protagonist can react, an old woman from the village steps forward. She doesn't look at the protagonist. She looks down at the bleeding man and says, completely devoid of emotion, "You came back."
And the man's reaction to this statement is absolute horror.
Right, he screams at her, "You said you'd let me go."
And the old woman's reply is so cold. She just says, And we did. You traveled.
You traveled.
You traveled. This exchange is the crux of the entire horror story. Let's unpack the implications of this.
Please, because I am so unsettled by this. Because the protagonist asks the man, assuming he's been trapped down there, were you stuck in that well for years?
But the man's answer changes everything we thought we knew. He says, no. They let travelers leave the village. But the road always brings us back.
This introduces a concept that I want you to elaborate on, because you mentioned it earlier in your notes before we started recording.
Geographical.
Determinism.
Yes. Geographical determinism.
What does that actually mean here?
The trap operates on a terrifying form of geographical determinism. It doesn't just hold you physically in the moment, it holds you metaphysically across space and time.
Okay.
It actually lets you leave. You can get back on a bus, get on a plane, go back to your apartment in London or New York or Tokyo and think you've completely escaped. You resume your normal travels.
Right.
But the universe itself has been bent around you. The fabric of reality is now curved so that every path you take, no matter how far away you go, will eventually, inevitably route you back to this specific stone well in Eastern Europe.
It's like a cosmic gravity well.
Exactly.
You can orbit it for a while, you can fly out to the edges of the solar system, but eventually the gravity is going to pull you back down into the center. The man explicitly says, every traveler who comes here eventually returns. Always through the well.
Always through the well. And the village keeps meticulous records of this process. It isn't random.
For the ledger.
The name's on the well.
The protagonist looks closely at the side of the stone well and sees that it isn't just cracked. It is covered in hundreds of names scratched into the rock. Names in English, Cyrillic, Japanese, Arabic.
Global reach.
The names of all the travelers who have been pulled into the gravity well. And near the bottom of the stones, amidst the fluttering moths, there is a newly carved, empty space.
Just waiting.
A blank spot, clearly waiting for a new name.
That empty space is a physical countdown. It is waiting for the protagonist. And it is at this exact moment of ancient, visceral, folklore-style dread that the narrative introduces its most brilliant, enduring twist.
Oh, man.
It introduces modern technology.
This is the detail that absolutely blew my mind. The protagonist's smartphone, which has been a useless brick of glass and metal since they got off the bus, suddenly vibrates in their pocket.
They suddenly have full signal.
In the shadow of a supernatural well, miles from any cell tower.
Makes no sense.
They pull the phone out, and the screen lights up with 2 automated push notifications from their travel itinerary app.
This is so good.
The first notification says, trip completed. And the second notification pops up a second later, return journey scheduled.
This is a breathtaking juxtaposition. You have this ancient moth-covered stone structure, and it is somehow interfacing with a Silicon Valley smartphone app.
How does that even work? Seriously, how does ancient magic have jurisdiction over a digital algorithm?
We have to theorize here because it fundamentally changes how we view the village.
Okay.
If the village was just an ancient relic, it would ignore the phone entirely. But the fact that it sends a push notification suggests the trap is an evolving entity.
Right.
It adapts to the tools of its prey.
Like a digital honeypot.
Exactly. Modern travelers rely entirely on digital itineraries, GPS coordinates, and travel apps to structure their reality. If it isn't on the app, it isn't real.
True.
The village recognizes this psychological framework and hacks into it. It uses sympathetic magic, but instead of using a lock of hair or a drop of blood like in the old days, it uses the traveler's digital footprint.
That is so deeply unsettling. It's confirming what the bleeding man just said, but in the sterile corporate language of an app.
Yeah.
Trip completed means the trap is closed.
Yeah.
Return journey scheduled means your eventual descent into the well is now a fixed point in the future.
It's using their own tools of exploration against them to announce their doom.
And almost as if the notification was a starting gun, the physical machinery of the well starts up again.
The grinding starts again.
The scraping sound inside the dark stone resumes. But this time, it's different. It's much faster. It's frantic. Something is climbing up the inside of the well right now.
Coming up fast.
The bleeding man scrambles backward, grabs the protagonist's ankle, and whispers, "They're coming."
The atmosphere in the square shifts instantly.
Yeah.
The 20 villagers who have been staring blankly at the well this entire time all turn their heads simultaneously.
Their empty eyes lock dead onto the protagonist. They're no longer attendants watching the machine. They are guards watching the prey.
And the old woman, who seems to act as the voice of the village's operating system, steps closer and delivers a formal, almost mocking initiation.
What does she say?
She says, "You've seen the well, you've seen the travelers. Now your journey can begin.
It is such a twisted perversion of the traveler's core desire.
It really is.
The whole reason the protagonist came here was to have a unique journey, to have an experience that no one else had documented. And the village is looking at them and saying, "You wanted an authentic journey." Okay, here it is.
It is punishing them by giving them exactly what they asked for, and then we reach the climax of the horror.
The protagonist is paralyzed by fear, staring into the endless black opening of the well.
Just waiting.
A pale hand appears over the edge, then a second hand, and then a face slowly pulls itself up out of the darkness.
And the face climbing out of the well.
Oh, God.
It belongs to the protagonist.
I felt my stomach drop reading this. It is an exact duplicate. The face is identical and is wearing the exact same obscure hiking jacket. It is carrying the exact same brand of travel backpack.
Down to the last detail.
It is even wearing the same terrified expression, at least for a moment. It's a mirror image clawing its way out of the earth.
This brings us to the ultimate theft, what we might call the doppelganger protocol.
The doppelganger protocol.
The village doesn't just kill people to feed on them, it replaces them.
The duplicate pulls itself over the edge and stands up. And the transcript notes a horrifying detail. Its movements are stiff and unnatural, like it was learning how to move for the first time.
Like a newborn fawn, but sinister.
Yeah, it is a freshly minted copy, adjusting to physical reality.
And then it speaks.
It looks right at the protagonist. Its terrified expression melts into a calm, polite smile, and it speaks with the protagonist's exact voice. It says, "You traveled far, but every trip ends somewhere."
Imagine the psychological violence of that moment.
I can't even.
Hearing your own voice, seeing your own mannerisms, being used to announce your own obsolescence.
The bleeding man, who is still cowering on the ground, explains the brutal mechanics of what is happening. He looks at the protagonist and says, "This is how they do it. They replace us, then we become part of the road."
Let's spend some time on that phrase, becoming part of the road.
It's so weird.
It is a profoundly disturbing concept of repurposing.
What does it actually mean? Literally or metaphorically?
Likely both, honestly. The original travelers, their bodies, their souls, their metaphysical essence are consumed.
Right.
But they aren't just destroyed. They are utilized to pave the way for the next victims. They become the literal infrastructure of the trap itself.
Yeah.
The geographical pull that brings people back, that pull is powered by the souls of the people who have already been consumed.
So they become the battery that keeps the lights on in the empty houses. They become the gravity well.
Precisely. The original is digested by the machine, while the duplicate is exported out into the real world.
Exported. It makes me think of an invasive species in nature.
Oh, how so?
There are certain types of parasitic wasps or beetles that perfectly mimic the pheromones, the scent, and the appearance of a local insect just so they can infiltrate a hive.
Oh, I've heard of that.
The guards at the entrance of the colony let them walk right in because they look and smell like they belong. But they're only there to hollow out the colony from the inside and lay their own eggs.
That analogy hits the nail on the head, and it forces us to ask a terrifying question about the scale of this operation.
What's the scale?
What is the ultimate end goal of this village? Is it merely feeding on these individuals for localized sustenance, like an anglerfish sitting in the dark waiting for a minnow? Or is it executing a slow, systematic, global colonization?
Right, because the duplicate tells the protagonist, you don't need to travel anymore. You've reached your final destination.
Yeah.
It implies that the duplicate is going to do the traveling now. The village is a factory, and the duplicates are the product being shipped worldwide.
Think about the implications.
How many of these duplicates are walking around in the world right now? How many CEOs or politicians or just people at the coffee shop are actually products of this stone well?
It's an infiltration of global society, one arrogant traveler at a time.
Faced with this reality, staring at their own unsettling, smiling duplicate, while the 20 villagers slowly start forming a tight circle around them, the protagonist's fight-or-flight instinct finally kicks in.
Better late than never.
The illusion is gone, the trap is sprung, and there's
Right.
nothing left to rationalize.
The bleeding man from the well screams at them to run, and the protagonist doesn't hesitate. They break through a gap in the circle of villagers and sprint.
The adrenaline dump here is massive. They run back down a dirt road, boots slipping in the mud. They tear past the ancient wooden houses with their blazing lights, past the empty, dusty grocery store, leaving the center square behind.
Just running blindly.
They hit the tree line and just keep running through the fog-covered forest, branches whipping against their face. They run until their lungs are absolutely burning, fleeing back toward the spot where the bus abandoned them.
They're running back to the threshold, hoping to cross back into the rational world.
And amazingly, they make it. The trees break, they stumble out onto the paved mountain road, and to their absolute shock, the bus is waiting.
The same ancient bus.
The headlights are glowing dull yellow through the thick fog. The engine is idling. The protagonist runs up to the doors. They hiss open slowly, and the silent driver is sitting there.
The driver.
He looks down at the panting, terrified protagonist and speaks his first words since the trip began. He asks, heading back.
Heading back, and the protagonist is so consumed by panic that they don't even process the question.
No, they just nod frantically, run up the steps, and collapse into a seat near the middle of the bus.
Just grateful to be out of there.
The doors hiss shut, the engine revs, and the bus slowly starts rolling forward, driving away from the village and down the mountain.
And the narrative explicitly tells us that as the bus picks up speed and the fog starts to blur the trees, the protagonist, for the first time since arriving, feels safe.
Safe.
They lean their head against the cold glass of the window and close their eyes, believing they have survived the impossible.
But the trap has layers, and the narrative architecture here is devastating, because the escape is completely false.
It's all a setup.
It is the most gut-wrenching part of this entire deep dive, because the relief you feel as a reader is weaponized against you in the final paragraph.
Let's deconstruct this twist ending, because every single element of it is perfectly engineered to crush any lingering hope. We have to look at the bus and the driver again.
Okay, let's look at them.
Previously, they seem like a neutral, albeit creepy, transport service, just a weird local bus that dropped people off at the wrong spot. But the ending reveals they are fully, actively complicit in the village's operation.
They are part of the delivery and export system. The bus isn't public transit, it's the conveyor belt of the factory.
Exactly. Which changes the context of the driver's question. When he asks, heading back, it is not a polite question from a service worker confirming a route.
No.
It takes on a deeply sinister double meaning. Heading back to the real world. Or heading back into the cycle.
Oh, that's dark.
Yeah.
The driver knows exactly what he is transporting. The protagonist is sitting there, eyes closed, catching their breath, thinking they have won a victory over the village. But then they open their eyes and look at the bus windows across the aisle.
Right, and it's dark outside, so the glass is acting like a mirror, reflecting the interior of the bus.
The protagonist looks at the reflection. They see the empty seats. They see their own tired face. But they notice something impossible. In the reflection, there is only one person sitting in that section of the bus.
Only one.
Yet, in the quiet hum of the engine, the protagonist can clearly hear breathing coming from the seat directly behind them. Slow, steady, very close breathing.
The missing reflection is the definitive mythological proof of the supernatural nature of what is happening. The copy does not cast a reflection because it does not yet have a soul.
The protagonist freezes. The breathing is right at the back of their neck. Very slowly, terrified of what they are going to see, they turn their head and look over the back of their seat.
And there it is.
Sitting directly behind them, in the dim light of the bus, wearing the exact same jacket, is their duplicate. And the duplicate isn't attacking, it isn't growling, it is just sitting there, looking at the protagonist and smiling that calm, polite, empty smile.
The story concludes on a note of absolute, inescapable doom. The protagonist hasn't outrun the trap, they haven't escaped the village.
No.
They are merely being escorted back to their doom while their replacement is successfully deployed into the world. The trap wasn't something they could outrun, because the trap isn't a place, it's a cycle.
The traveler thought they won the game by getting back on the bus, but the bus was just carrying the finished product out of the factory. And as the realization sets in, the protagonist looks out the window into the fog one last time. As the bus rolls down the mountain, they pass that wooden road sign, the one that previously had "last trip here" scratched into it.
But the ledger has been updated.
Right. Underneath those words, there is a fresh carving in the wood. 4 new words, hurriedly scratched into the sign. Another traveler returned.
It beautifully, horrifically completes the cycle we discussed earlier at the well.
The road always brings us back.
Right. The original traveler is now doomed. Whether the duplicate kills them right there on the bus, or whether the geographical gravity well eventually drags them back to jump into the well themselves, their fate is sealed. They are destined to become part of the road.
While the duplicate assumes their life, think about the tragedy of that integration.
It's chilling.
Think about how seamlessly that smiling duplicate is going to slide into the protagonist's life. It has their face, their voice, their memories downloaded from the digital ether, their clothes. It will fly back home. It will walk into the protagonist's apartment. It will sit down for coffee with the mother who warned against this very trip, and it will look her right in the eyes and pretend that everything is perfectly fine.
And she won't know.
The original protagonist is gone forever, completely erased by their own arrogance and their obsession with discovering the undiscovered.
When we pull back and look at the entirety of this narrative, we are left with a chilling portrait of exploitation. We have tracked a modern traveler whose hubris and desperate thirst for commodified authenticity led them off the safety of the map and straight into a highly organized snare.
Right.
We analyzed how the environment itself, the geographical isolation, the sensory deprivation of the fog, the uncanny cargo cult architecture of the silent village, it all worked in tandem to systematically strip away the traveler's physical and psychological defenses.
And we explored the terrifying folklore mechanics of the stone well, a process that doesn't just consume explorers for sustenance, but mass produces sinister copies to release back into the global population.
A fact.
It is a perfect, self-sustaining loop of disappearance and imitation, utilizing the very digital tools that modern travelers rely on to track its prey.
It really forces us to reconsider the power dynamics of exploration itself. The foundational assumption of travel is that the human is always the active observer, and the destination is always the passive observed.
Always.
But that dynamic is completely shattered here. In this narrative, the destination is an active, hungry, calculating entity that requires human fuel to maintain its illusion and propagate its species.
Which brings us back to you, the listener. At the very start of this deep dive, I asked you to think about your own travel habits. Your desire to find those pristine places that no one else has touched.
We all want that.
We all want that unique story. We all want to feel like pioneers in a world that feels completely mapped out by satellites and social media. But this story forces us to look at the darker side of that desire.
It asks a profound question.
What happens when the undiscovered wants to stay that way? Or worse, what happens when it's actively waiting for us to find it?
The human drive to seek out the unknown is powerful, and it's responsible for much of our progress as a species. But it's essential to respect the boundaries of that unknown.
Absolutely.
When a place has no documentation, no footprint in the modern world, and locals turn pale at the mention of its name.
Take the hint.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Perhaps it's not a prize waiting to be claimed. Perhaps it is functioning exactly as intended, hidden away in the fog, waiting for the right kind of arrogance to walk down its road.
Absolutely. So I want to leave you with one final thought today. Something to mull over the next time you are scrolling through social media or catching up with people at a party.
Just hear it.
The next time you hear a friend bragging about finding a completely undocumented, perfectly pristine location that no one ever talks about, a place they claim changed their life,
Be careful.
I want you to look closely at their eyes. Listen to the cadence of their voice. Watch how they move. And ask yourself, did your friend really discover that place? Or did that place just discover them?